The Church of England is set to issue an apology for the anti-Semitic expulsion of Jews from medieval England back in the 13th century, marking the first time such an admission was made, according to church officials. Now, despite the Church of England not existing in the 13th century, created hundreds of years later by Henry VIII, church officials have apologized for the role of the church throughout history and its part in stoking anti-Semitism. For some more insight to the story here, we're joined by our UK correspondent, Jonathan Sacerdoti. Thanks for being with us. Of course, give us a bit of a backstory here. What led to this unusual set of statements from the church?
The church was instrumental in endorsing historic legislation that restricted Jews in the country, and that was including things like forcing them to wear badges that identified them as Jews and even banning them from certain professions. And ultimately, that did lead to the nationwide expulsion of Jews in the 13th century, though, as you say, the Church of England itself didn't exist at the time. That means that this was something that perhaps the church is apologizing for more broadly. Of course, the Church of England was set up by Henry VIII. Church officials have apologized for the role of the church in England throughout history, therefore, and its part in stoking anti-Semitism. And this comes at a time when there is an increase in anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom that's concerning many politically, many in the Jewish community, and also, of course, many in the church, which means that at this 800th anniversary moment, they're feeling it might be a good opportunity to make that apology public and to try to show that these sorts of feelings don't remain within the church. Of course, there are people in the Jewish community who say that this is rather too late, but better late than never, and that it may help to increase awareness of anti-Semitism in the current period and make life easier for Jews if people are aware of the long history of anti-Semitism that exists in Britain.
That's certainly right. The question in my mind is, okay, we're talking about, as you mentioned, this really a medieval chapter of history, not so relevant to people today, but if it encourages the conversation or opens up new avenues for dialogue around this topic today, does that seem to be where this is being taken or how it's being used, at least currently?
Well, certainly that is one hope of those who will be making the apology, and some again politically and within Jewish circles. But it's also important historically, and just as there's been a move across the world really to try to make apologies or at least acknowledge and make people aware of historic injustices against minorities around the world, perhaps they feel that it's time to do the same for Jewish people in the UK, where there were blood libels and expulsions of Jews, persecution of Jews on quite a horrific level back in that era. And so it's important to acknowledge it now, even if, of course, life as a Jew in Great Britain is very good in many ways in the current era. So I think that it's a combination of marking a historic wrong and acknowledging the church's part in it, which is vital. But of course, there are also issues about portions of the church today still perhaps having anti-Semitic feelings, often in the sense that they wish to convert Jews to Christianity. And while that isn't across the board and it isn't necessarily a mainstream feature of modern Christianity in Britain, it's something that still exists. And there will be those in the Jewish community who say, as well as apologizing for this centuries-old anti-Semitism, there also ought to be some examination closer to the current period of what might be going wrong as well.
Jonathan Sacerdoti, as always, thanks for being with us.